Hi everyone, so in this video we will cover the past paper questions related to chapter 13, the periodic table. Okay, before doing the questions related to chapter 13, we must know some of the trends related to this chapter. First of all, you must know that group 1, alkali metals in the periodic table, their reactivity increases down the group, whereas the halogens, their reactivity decreases down the group. They are group 7. For noble gases, they are unreactive, and because they have full outer shell electrons, so they will not react and they are inert. So what else we will know about the alkali metals? That alkali metals, the group 1, they are soft, they have low melting points. Of course, they have a high melting points compared to the non-metals, but compared to other metals, they have low melting points and they react with water to form alkaline solution and also a hydrogen gas. Similarly, because they are very reactive, so we have to store them under oil to prevent their reactions with air or water. Let's see for halogens. Halogens are colored diatomic molecules because they just need one electron in their outermost shell. So in nature, they are present in a form of diatomic. They are never present as monoatomic. Let's see about their displacement reactions. So there are some halogens that are very reactive. As we know that reactivity decreases down the group. So for fluorine, for example, it is the most reactive one among all the halogens. So it can displace all the other halogens from its salts. Okay. So this is what we call the displacement reaction, in which the more reactive element can displace the less reactive one. Okay, let's see about transition metals. They are present in the center of the periodic table. And why we call them transition metals? Because they have variable oxidation states. For example, they can sometimes have the oxidation state of +2, or they can have the +3 or 1 +1 +2. They don't have a stable oxidation state. It means they can lose sometimes 2 electrons, sometimes 3. It depends on their oxidation state, okay? And most of their compounds are colored. They always make colorful compounds. Also, they act as catalysts. Why they act as catalysts? Because they have variable oxidation states. Similarly, they have very high melting points compared to group 1 metals, and they are less reactive compared to other metals. So now let's see one by one each questions related to this chapter. So first question, which statement describes the periodic table? First, the elements are arranged in order of their nucleon number. Wrong. They are arranged in order of their proton number. It is used to predict the properties of elements. Yes, right. So option 2 and 3, they are right. That is C. So C is the correct option. Let's see question 3. Which statement about the periodic table is correct? Element in the same group have the same number of electron shells. That's wrong. The period number will tell you the electron shells. So elements in the same period will have same number of electron shells, okay? It contains the element arranged in order of increasing proton number. Yes, that option is right. So option B is correct. Let's see question 4. Which statement about the periodic table is correct? Most metallic elements are on the left. Yes, that's right. Most of the metallic elements are on the left side of the periodic table, whereas on the right side we have non-metals. So option A is the right one. We don't have to look other options. Okay, let's see question 5. Which elements is classified as a non-metal in the periodic table? As we already know, all the elements after group 4, they are actually non-metals. So we have to see group 4 or above. So which one belongs to group 4? Of course, the chlorine. Chlorine is a non-metal because it belongs to group 7. Okay, let's see question 6. Element P and Q have the same number of electron shells. An atom of Q has more electron in its outer electron shell than an atom of P. So what does it mean? If they have same number of shells, it means they belong to same period, P and Q, okay? Now let's see the second information. Q has more electrons. It means if the Q has more electrons, then it is on the right side, whereas P is on the left side. So P is more metallic and Q is more non-metallic, right? So now let's see which statements are correct. P and Q are in the same group. Wrong, because they have same number of shells, so they should be in the same period. So option 2 is right. P has a greater tendency to form positive ions than Q. P is on the left side, right? Because it has less number of electrons. So P is on the left side. So it means it has more tendency to form positive ions, because on left side we have metals. So it means the third option is also right. So that's why C. C is the correct option over here. Let's see question 7. Where in the periodic table is the metallic character of the element greatest? So where it is greatest? Of course, on the left side, because on the left side we have metals. So left or right side of the period? Of course, left. So A or B can be right. What about the bottom or the top of the group. So for this one, you have to remember that because when we move down the group, the electron shell increases, right? So when electron shell increases, the distance between the large shell electrons and the nucleus also increases. So it means that element has more tendency to lose electrons because the nucleus cannot bind that electron, the large electrons, to itself, right? So that's why it is more easy for the down elements to lose the electrons easily. So that's why the metallic property will increase from to the bottom. So A is the right option over here. Let's see question 8. The number of protons and number of neutrons in the atom of element X, Y, and Z are shown. Okay, so which statement about the element is correct? First, X and Y are isotopes of the same element. For isotope, they must have same proton number, but they don't have. Okay, so this is not right. Z forms an ion with a +2 charge. Let's see Z. So the number of protons are 8. So it means it has 2 electrons in the first shell and 6 electrons in the last shell. So it means it will gain the 2 electrons. So it will make -2 charge because the proton numbers and electron numbers are always equal, right? So that's why this option is also not right. Let's see C. X and Z react together to form an ionic compound. X and Z, let's see. No, that's not right because X has 4 electrons in the last shells, right? Because the proton and electron number is equal. So the first shell, if have 2 electrons, then the second shell, the last one, will have 4. So it has 4. It means it's non-metallic. This one is also non-metallic because it has 6 electrons. So ionic compounds are not formed between 2 non-metals. It's formed between a metal and a non-metal. So this option is also not right. So we are just left with D option. That is right, of course, because this one has 4 electrons. It belongs to group 4. This one belongs to group 5. And this one belongs to group 6. So they all are non-metals. So option D is the correct one. Let's see question 9. Part of the periodic table is shown which element form an acidic oxide. We already know that non-metals usually make the acidic oxide. So where we have non-metals, of course, the B. Because this is group A. So these are inert. They don't form any oxide and they don't react because they are noble gases, right? So B is the right option over here because it's a non-metal. Let's see question 10. Part of the periodic table is shown. Element Q has a low boiling point, low density, and does not conduct electricity. Which element is Q? So if it does not conduct electricity, that's obvious it's a non-metal, right? And if it has a low density and low boiling points, mostly the non-metals on the top, they have low melting and boiling points and low density. So that's why option A is the right option over here compared to D. Okay, because D has a more density compared to that of the A. Part of the periodic table is shown. Which element has 2 electrons in its outer shell and 3 electron shells? So for 2 electrons in the outermost shell, it means it belongs to groups 2. So this is group 2. So B or C can be the right option. Now let's see, it has 3 electron shells. It means it should belong to the period 3. So this is period 1. This is period 2. A, B belongs to period 2 and C and D belongs to period 3. Okay. So C is the right answer over here. Question 12. Part of the periodic table is shown. Which row describe the properties of X, Y, and Z? Good conductor of electricity. So Y and Z, because Z is a transition metal and Y is a metal, so they both are metals. So both of them are good conductor of electricity. So Y and Z, where we can find? Yes. So that is the right option. And high melting points, of course, transition metals have very high melting points. So C is the correct option here. Question 13. The properties of an element are shown here. Which element has these properties? Okay, let's see. Electrical conductivity is very high. So it means A, D, or C options can be right because they are metals, right? But the density is low. So density usually increases down the group. So if you see, A or C can be the right option. Reaction with water reacts violently with cold water. We must remember, I already have told you in start that the group 1 metals or group 2 metals, they react violently with the water, right? So A is the right option here because it has a low density also and it reacts violently with the cold water. So A is the correct option. We cannot choose C because C is a transition metal and it has a very high density. Same is for D. And what about the reactivity? The transition metals have low reactivity compared to group 1 and 2. Okay, so option A is the right option here. Question 14. The diagram shows the position of elements E, F, G, and H in the periodic table. Which statements about elements E, F, G, and H are correct? E has a higher density than F. Wrong, because F is below. So if you move down the group, the density increases. E has a higher melting point than F. Yes, that's right, because the melting point of the group 1 decreases down the group. Okay, so 2 option is the right one. G has a darker color than H. Wrong. Okay, these are group 7 metals. So halogens, they are halogens, and halogens color increases, the intensity of the color increases down the group. It means H has a high intensity. It is more darker than G. So that's why the third option is also wrong. So if we see the 1 and 3 is wrong, so we are left with 2 and 4, right? So 2 and 4 is the right option here. G has a lower melting point than H. Yes, that's right, because the melting point increases down the group in group 7. It has an opposite trend in melting and boiling points compared to group 1, okay? So 4 and 2 option, that is option D, is the correct option here. Question 15. Part of the periodic table is shown. Which row correctly describe the properties of element W, X, Y, and Z? Has variable oxidation states. So for that, it should be Z, because they are transition metals. So Z, C, or D option can be right. Now let's see, reacts with cold water. Okay, only the metals can react with the cold water. So W is the right answer here. So we already have find the right answer. Very unreactive, of course, it's a noble gas. So that's why C option is the right option here. Question 16. Which statement about alkali metal is correct? Let's see one by one. Lithium, alkali means they are talking about group 1 metals, okay? Alkali metals are group 1 metals, whereas group 2 metals are called alkaline earth metals. So it means they are asking about the first group, okay? Lithium, so D option, of course, is wrong now. So now let's see A, B, and C. Lithium is more dense than the sodium. Wrong, because the density increases down the group and lithium is on the top, right? So that's why this option is wrong. Sodium is more reactive than potassium. Again, wrong. The reactivity increases down the group. So sodium is above potassium. So again, wrong. Now let's see for C. Sodium has higher melting point than potassium. Yes, that's right, because the melting points are decreasing down the group. So C option is the correct option here. Question 17. Which statement about elements in group 1 is correct? Hydrogen is evolved when they react with water. Yes, that's right. Whenever group 1 metals react with water, the hydrogen gas is produced. So that's why option 1 is right. That is A. What is not a property of group 1 metals? So A, they are soft and can be cut with a knife. Yes, they are very soft. They react when exposed to oxygen in the air. Yes, they are very reactive. They produce an acidic solution. Wrong, because they are metals. So metal will always produce basic solution. So option C is not a property of group 1 metals. Question 19. Sodium and rubidium are elements in group 1 of the periodic table. Which statement is correct? Okay, sodium atoms have more electrons than rubidium atoms. Wrong. Rubidium is below than sodium in the group, right? So it has more electrons, rubidium. Sodium has a lower density than rubidium. Yes, that's right, because sodium is above in the group, whereas rubidium is below. So that's why option B is the right option here. Question 20. Rubidium is a group 1 metal. Which statement about rubidium is not correct? It has the higher melting point than lithium. Wrong, because the melting point in group 1 metal is decreasing down the group, right? So decreasing down the group means lithium is on the top and rubidium is at the bottom. So that's why lithium will have higher melting point. So option A is the wrong option here now. Sodium is a group 1 metal. Which property that is typical of most metals is not shown by sodium? So which property it will not show? That is high melting point, because metals mostly have high melting points. But because group 1 metals, they have low melting points compared to other metals. So we can choose the option B, because all other options are right for the sodium. Question 22. Which row shows the properties of an element that is in the same group of the periodic table as lithium? So same group means it belongs to group 1. So electrical conductivity should be high, right? What about the density? Density should also increase down the group. So lithium density is around 0 point something. So 0.97 can be the right option here, because the density 8.93 is not right, because this is the density for mostly for the transition metals, right? And Compared to transition metals, the group 1 density is lower. So we cannot choose the option B. Question 23. Lithium and potassium are metals in group 1 of the periodic table. Lithium has a melting point of 181 and a density of 0.53. Which row describe the melting point and density of potassium? So remember that melting point is decreasing down the group, right? So the lower melting point is for potassium. Now we have to find. So less than 181, yes. So A or B can be right. Now let's see for the density. Density, of course, in the periodic table for all the metals and non-metals, it increases down the group because the number of shells are increasing, okay? So the density will be greater than 0.53. So that's why option B is correct. Question 24. The melting points and boiling points of the elements of group 1 of the periodic table are shown over here. Which pair of the elements are liquid at 800 degrees Celsius? So we have to find the melting and we have to compare the melting and boiling points, right? So which one can be liquid at 800? So those whose boiling point is less than 800, it means they will be gas. So these all of them have less. Can you see 759, 688 and 671? These boiling points are lower than 800. It means they all will be gases at 800. So we are just left with lithium and sodium. So lithium and sodium are liquid at 800 degrees Celsius. That's option C. Question 25. Some information about properties of group 1 element is shown. What are the values of X, Y, and Z? So let's see about the melting point. Of course, you can see the trend is decreasing down the group. So the melting point should be how much for potassium and rubidium? We have to find over here. So X and Y value should be B can be the right option or D can be right. So B or B can be right. But now let's see for the density. So the density for the rubidium should increase. So that's why option D is the right option here because in B we have less density, right? So option D is the correct. Okay, question 26. Atoms of sodium, rubidium, and element Q each have one outer shell electron. Some properties of these elements are shown. Okay, we can see this table. It already has some properties given for sodium, rubidium, and element Q. So what is Q? So Q, for that, it must belong to group 1. So group 1, hydrogen also belong to group 1, of course, but it is not a metal, right? So we have to find some metal that is below the rubidium. So which one belongs to below rubidium? It's not lithium. Lithium is above sodium and also above rubidium. So potassium is also potassium or cesium can be the right option here. So if we see here after rubidium, it should be cesium because potassium is above rubidium, not below rubidium. Okay, so D option is the right option here. You can also check the periodic table because it will be available in exam. Okay, let's say question 27. Group 2 elements show the same trend as group 1 elements. Which statement about elements in group 2 is correct? So we have to find the same trends like group 1. So let's see the first option. The melting point of barium is higher than melting point of calcium. If you see the group 2 elements, the barium is below calcium. So it means the calcium has higher melting and boiling point compared to barium. So this option is wrong. Let's see option B. Barium is more reactive than beryllium. So let's see beryllium is on the top, whereas barium is at the bottom. So of course the reactivity increases down the group in group 1. So it will also increase in group 2. So that's why option D is the right option over here. Let's see question 28. Some information about elements in group 2 of the periodic table is shown over here. Okay. Which row shows the correct trends in reactivity, density, and melting point of the elements going down group 2 of the periodic table? Okay, let's see the reactivity. So the reactivity, if you see that the time taken for the reactivity is greater than 300 seconds and then 60-30, it means the reactivity is increasing down the group, right? So it increases down the group. C and D option can be right. Why it increases? Because it is taking less time for the reaction to take place, right? Let's see for the density now. So 1.85, then 174, 154, then again it has increased. So it means it's not a clear trend, right? So again, this option is right, COD. So let's see for the melting points. The melting points, if you see clearly, again, we have no clear trend because if you see after 650, again, we have 850, that is more. So there is no clear trend. That's why option D is the right option over here. Question 29. Elements in group 1 and group 2 show the same trends in their reaction with water and in their density. Which row shows how the properties of barium compare with calcium? So barium, let's see in the group. The barium is at the bottom of the group 2, whereas calcium is on the top, right? It is in the fourth of the period. So let's see now reaction with the water. So calcium will have, because the reactivity increases down the group, so barium reaction will be faster with the water. A or B option can be right. Now let's see for the density. Density, of course, it increases down the group for all the metals and non-metals. So again, higher and faster. These options are the right option, that is A. So A is the right option over here. Okay, let's see question 30. Information about element J is shown. Its atoms have 4 electrons in their outer shell. It is a non-metal. Its oxide has a macromolecular structure and it has a high melting point. So first of all, if you see have 4 electrons in their outer shell, it means it belongs to group 4. So let's see which one belongs to group 4. Carbon and silicon, both of them belongs to group 4. Okay, so B and C option can be right. A and D we have to exclude because they don't belong to group 4. It is a non-metal. Of course, they are non-metal. Its oxide has a macromolecular structure. Okay, so that is the bigger difference between carbon and silicon, because the silicon oxide is a macromolecular structure, but carbon dioxide, it is not a macromolecular structure, right? So that's why option C is the right option over here. Question 31. Elements in group 4 of the periodic table are shown: carbon, silicon, germanium, tin, and lead. What does not occur in group 4 as it is descended? Let's see. The proton number of the element increases. Yes, because if you move down the group, of course, the proton number will increase. The element become more metallic. Yes, that's also right. If you go down the group, the matter, even if they are non-metals, the metallic properties increases and non-metallic properties tend to decrease. The elements have more electrons in their outer shell. That's wrong because they all belong to group 4. So in their outer shell, it will remain the same, that is 4. Okay. So that's why option C is the wrong option here. Okay, let's see question 32. The table gives some properties of group 4 elements. Okay, these are all the properties. Which row describe the properties of silicon? So which row describe the properties of silicon? Let's see one by one. So it means the value of the density should be higher than 2.2, but it should be less than 5.3. Okay, so less than 5.3, but higher than, so it can be 2.3 or 3.1. Okay, any option can be right. Now let's see A or B can be right. So let's see for the boiling point. So the boiling point, if you see, it's decreasing down the group, right? So it should be between 4800 and 2800. So it can be this one, right? So option A can be the right option here because this value is between 4800 and 2800. So option A is the correct option here. Okay, let's see question 33. Selenium is an element in group 6. Group 6 elements follow similar trends to group 7 elements. Which statements about selenium is correct? So it has higher density than sulfur. Yes, that's right, because sulfur is in period 3, whereas selenium is in period 4. So that's why option A is the right option because the density increases down the group. Question 34. The elements oxygen and sulfur are in the same group of the periodic table. Which statement about oxygen and sulfur is not correct? So let's see where they belong to. Sulfur and oxygen, they both belongs to group 6. So they are non-metals. Yes, right. They have giant covalent structures. Sulfur and oxygen, they don't have giant covalent structures. So that's why option B is not the right option. We don't have to look for the other one. Question 35. Element R forms a covalent compound R2Si with silicon. Which row describe R? So of course, if it is forming a covalent compound, then it should be a non-metallic. So C or D can be right. Now it should belong to which group? Of course, it will not belong to group 2 because group 2 are metals. So that's why group 6 is the right option, that is D. Question 36. Metal X react with non-metal Y to form an ionic compound with the formula X2Y. So X is a metal here now, okay? So if X is a metal, then it means it belongs to group 1. Because if you see on Y, we have nothing here. And Y belongs to which group? It means it has 2 oxidation states. That's why X has 2 number here, right? Because each Y needs 2 X. It means Y belongs to group 6. Okay, now let's see. Y is in the group 6 of the periodic table. Yes, right. X is in the group 1 of the periodic table. Yes, that's right. So 1 and 3 option is right. That is A. Let's see question 37. A new element, oxfortium OX, was discovered with the following properties. Okay, these are all the properties. In which group of the periodic table should be the new element be placed? So first of all, we have to see the most common thing, that is electrical conduction. It does not conduct electricity, right? So it means it should not belong to group 3. Okay, now it only belongs to B, C or D. But it is also forming a bond. If you see over here, it is forming a bond, right? So if it is forming a bond here, it means it also does not belong to group 8, because group 8 are noble gases. Now we are left with B and C. So for B and C, we have to find the oxidation state. Then we will better know. If you see here, there are 3 bonds here, right? Between two atoms of OX, we have 3 bonds. That it means it has a triple bond. So triple bond means it needs 3 electrons in its outermost shell. So it means it belongs to group 5, because group 5 has 5 electrons in the last shell. So it just needs 3 electrons. So that's why option B is the correct option here. Question 38. Which statement about nitrogen and phosphorus is not correct? Okay, both are in the same group of the periodic table. So if you see nitrogen and phosphorus, they both belong to same group, that is group 5. Okay, so that's right. Both are in the same period of the periodic table. That's wrong. If they are in the same group, they cannot be in the same period. So that's why option B is the right option here. Okay, let's see question 39. Which statement about the element in group 7 of the periodic table is correct? First, chlorine can displace bromine from bromides. Yes, that's right. Why? Chlorine, because chlorine is at the top of the periodic table, whereas bromine is at the bottom of the periodic table. So bromine is below. And in non-metals, the reactivity increases above the group but decreases down the group. So that's why if bromine is below, so its reactivity is less. So chlorine can easily replace it or displace it, because chlorine is more reactive. So option A is the right option here. Let's see question 40. Which statement about the halogen is correct? So remember, halogens are the group 7 elements. A sample of bromine react with potassium chloride solution. So it can react? No, because we have chlorine over here, right? And bromine is less reactive. A sample of bromine reacts with potassium iodide solution. Yes, that's right, because bromine is above than iodine. So bromine is more reactive than iodine. So that's why it can react with potassium iodide. So option B is the right option here. Question 41. Which statement about the halogens and their compound is correct? So let's see one by one each option. The color of the elements get lighter going down the group 7. That's wrong. The color of the elements will tend to be more darker if you move down the group. Okay, let's see B option. The elements get less dense going down group 7. Again wrong. Why? Because the density increases for metals and non-metals, all of them going down the group. When chlorine is added to sodium iodide solution, iodine is formed. Yes, that's right, because chlorine is more reactive. So it can displace iodine from its solution. So that's why option C is the right option over here. Chlorine, bromine, and iodine are elements in group 7 of the periodic table. Which statement about these elements is not correct? Okay, let's see first. The color gets darker down the group. Yes, right. The density increases down the group. Yes, right. They are all gases at room temperature and pressure. Wrong. Chlorine is a gas, bromine is a liquid, and iodine is a solid. So that's why option C is a wrong option here. Okay, let's see question 43. The element in group 7 include chlorine, bromine, and iodine. Which statements are correct? First, iodine is more dense than chlorine. Yes, right? Because iodine is at the bottom, chlorine is on the top of the group. Iodine displaces chlorine. Wrong. Iodine cannot displace chlorine, because chlorine, of course, on the top. So the reactivity is more at the top in group 7 and decrease down the group. So iodine is below, so its reactivity is lower than the chlorine. So it cannot displace chlorine. Third, bromine is diatomic non-metal. Yes, that's right. All group 7 are diatomic in nature. Fourth, chlorine gas is darker in color than bromine vapor. That's wrong, because bromine vapors have purple color, because bromine is liquid at room temperature, but when it vaporizes, it gives a purple color. Whereas chlorine gas has a green color. So green is a lighter color as compared to the purple one. So that's why option 4 is also wrong. So we are just left with option 1 and 3, that is B. So option B is correct. Let's take question 44. Which element is less reactive than the other members of its group in the periodic table? So these all elements belong to group 7. If you look at the group 7, astatine, cesium, fluorine, and rubidium. So the reactivity decreases down the group in group 7. So we have to find the one that belongs to the bottom of the group, the group 7. Okay, so that's, if you check the group 7, astatine is at the bottom. So that's why option A is the right option over here. Let's see question 45. Fluorine is the element at the top of group 7 of the periodic table. Which statement describe fluorine? It is inert, wrong. It is monoatomic, again wrong. It is non-metallic, yes, that's right. So option C is the right option over here. Question 46 and question 46. An unseptium atomic number 117 is a man-made element that is below astatine in group 7 of the periodic table. Okay, what is expected state of an unseptium at room temperature? So because it belongs to group 7 and it is below the astatine, so of course astatine is solid, so it should also be solid. So that's why option D is the right option over here. Question 47. Question 47. Some information about an element from group 7 of the periodic table is shown over here. Okay, what is this element? So if you see, the melting point is -7 and boiling point is 59. So boiling point is more than the room temperature, that is 25, right? So it means, and whereas the melting point is less than the room temperature, so it means it is a liquid. So which one of them is a liquid? That of course is C. Option C is the right option over here, that is bromine. Question 48. Which row describe the structure of group 7 elements and the trend in their reactivity down the group? Okay, so structure, of course they are diatomic molecules, so A or B can be right. What about the reactivity? Reactivity in group 7 always decrease down the group. Remember, always fluorine is the most reactive one. So if you memorize this thing, that fluorine is the most reactive among its group members, so you will always remember that reactivity is decreasing down the group. So that's why option B is the right option here. Question 49. Which row describe a similarity and difference between chlorine and bromine? So similarity is both are gases, wrong. Bromine is a liquid and chlorine is a gas. Both exist as diatomic molecules. Yes, that's right. Both have atoms with 7 in outer shell electron. Yes, that's also right. And the third one, both react with aqueous potassium iodide. Yes, that's also right, because iodine is below chlorine and bromine. So these all three similarities are right. Now let's see the difference. Chlorine is more dense than bromine. Wrong. Chlorine is above bromine, so it is less dense. Only bromine will react with aqueous sodium chloride. Again wrong, because bromine cannot react with chloride salt, because chlorine is more reactive. Now we are just left with the last option, that is chlorine is more reactive than bromine, and that's right. So option D is correct. Question 50. Astatine is below iodine in group 7 in the periodic table. Which row describe the properties of astatine? So astatine, of course, is below iodine. Iodine is a solid. So astatine, of course, is also solid. So C and D options are right. Now let's see the displacement reactions. Displaces iodine but does not displace chlorine or bromine. Wrong. It cannot displace any one of them because it is below them. So it cannot displace any one of them. So that's why option D is right. Question 51. Astatine is an element in group 7 of the periodic table. Astatine is dash reactive than iodine. So it is less reactive because it is below than iodine. So it is less reactive. So that's why option A or B can be right. Now let's see second. The melting point of astatine is dash than the melting point of iodine. It will be greater, right? Because the melting point is increasing down the group. Both are solid, but astatine has a higher melting point. So that's why option A is the right option here. Of course, the color will become more darker. Why darker? Because the darker color, the color of the group 7 elements is increasing down the group. Okay, so it is more darker in color. So option A is the correct option here. Question 52. Astatine is an element in group 7 of the periodic table. It has only ever been produced in very small amount. What are the likely properties of astatine? So the color. What should be the color of the astatine? Of course, the color should increase, right? So the color can be black or dark brown. If you remember, above astatine, we have iodine, and iodine has a grayish black color. So that's why A option will be the right option here. And the state, of course, iodine has a state solid. So acetylene, of course, is below. So it will also be solid. So A is the right option here. Question 53. Group 7 elements show trends in their physical properties going down the group. So these are the trends of group 7 elements. Which row shows the missing headings for the properties in the table? So which one of them is a density, boiling point, or melting point? So in points, we have this one, right? So in points, we always have density. So that's why Z will be the density one. So where we can find the Z. So that's why option B or D can be right. Now let's see for melting and boiling point. Of course, the melting point is always lower than the boiling point. So which one is showing the melting point? 101 is lower than minus 34. It means 101 is actually melting point and minus 34 is the boiling point. So that's why X is a melting point. Okay, Y is a boiling point, right? And then C is the density. So option B is right here. Question 54. Some properties of the element in group 7 of the periodic table are shown. Again, we have some properties here. Which statement is correct? Okay, so let's see now. Bromine is a brown solid. Wrong. Bromine is actually a liquid. If you see the melting and boiling points, it is less than the room temperature. The melting point is less than the room temperature, but boiling point is higher. So it means it is a liquid. Fluorine is a pale yellow gas at room temperature. Yes, that's right. Is a pale yellow gas because if you see the melting and boiling points, both are lower lower than the room temperature, right? So fluorine, of course, we already know that. Even if you don't know the melting and boiling points, remember fluorine and chlorine both are gases. Bromine is a liquid. Iodine and acetylene both are solid. So that's why option B is the correct option here. Question 55. Element E and F are in the group 1 of the periodic table. E has higher melting point than F. Element J and L are in the group 7 of the periodic table. J has a higher density than F. So which elements have the highest atomic number in each group? So E has a higher melting point than F. So first of all, we have to remember again that what about the trend of the melting and boiling points? If you remember, the melting and boiling points are actually decreasing down the group in group 1. So if they are decreasing and E has a higher melting point, so it means E is at the top and F is at the bottom. So which one will have the more number of electrons or more has the highest atomic number? Of course, it will be the F. Okay, so we have to find the F option. So C or D can be the right. Now, element J and are in the same group 7 of the periodic table. J has higher density. So if J has higher density, it means it is below L. So J is the right option. J has more number of electrons, or you can say more number of protons. Atomic number is actually the proton number. So that's why option C is the correct option here. Question 56. Which statement about the properties of elements in group 1 and in the group 7 are correct? So let's see one by one. Bromine displaces iodine from an aqueous solution of potassium iodide. Yes, that's right. So option A, we don't have to look other options. Option A is the right option here because bromine is more reactive than iodine. Question 57. Which statement about the element in group 1 and 7 of the periodic table is correct? Chlorine has a darker color than iodine. Wrong. Iodine is below in the group, so iodine is more darker. The chlorine has a green color. Iodine has a grayish color. Each molecule of a halogen contains one atom. That is wrong. Okay. Molecule always contains more than one atom. So, and halogens mostly have 2 atoms together. Potassium reacts with cold water more vigorously than lithium. Yes, that option is right because reactivity is increasing down the group in group 1. So, lithium is less reactive than potassium because potassium is below in that group, right? So, that's why option C is the right option here. Question 58. Which statement about element in group 1 and 7 of the periodic table is correct? So, again, bromine reacts with potassium chloride to produce chlorine. Wrong. Bromine is less reactive than chlorine. Okay, so it cannot react. Iodine is monatomic. Again, wrong because all halogens are diatomic. Lithium has a higher melting point than potassium. Yes, that's right because lithium is on the top whereas potassium is below in the group. So actually the melting and boiling points in group 1 are decreasing down the group. So C option is the right. Question 59. Which statement about group 1 and group 7 element is correct? A. Group 7 elements are monatomic. Wrong. Lithium is more reactive with water than cesium. Wrong. Lithium is on top, whereas cesium at the bottom, and reactivity is increasing down the group in group 1. It has an opposite trend like group 7. Group 7, the reactivity is decreasing down the group, whereas in group 1, the reactivity is increasing down the group. So option B is wrong here. Let's see, the melting point of group 1 metal increased down the group. Again wrong, the melting point also decreased down the group, but in group 7, the melting point will increase. Okay, so the melting boiling points and the reactivity trends are opposite in group 1 and group 7, but the density trends are same. Okay, density always increase down the group in group 1 and also in group 7. Let's see now option D. We are just left with that one. Potassium bromide reacts with chlorine to produce an orange solution. Right, because when chlorine will react with the bromide solution, the bromine will be released in the solution, and whenever bromine is in the liquid solution, it always give an orange color. Okay, so that's why option D is a right option here. So bromine is actually a brown liquid, but in solution it gives a orange color. Remember that. Question 60. A group 1 metal, lithium, sodium or potassium, is reacted with group 7 element chlorine, bromine or iodine. Which compound is formed when the group 1 metal of high density react with group 7 element of the lowest density? So now we have to see the highest density means they should be at the bottom. So highest density means group 1 metals. Which one should be at the bottom? Lithium, potassium, potassium, lithium. So potassium is at the bottom. It has highest density, right? So B or C option can be right. Now let's see group 7 with the lowest density. So lowest density means it should be on the top, right? So chlorine or iodine, if you compare, chlorine is on the top where iodine is below in the group. So that's why option B is the right option. So chloride is the right option. Question 61. Lithium, sodium and potassium are elements in group 1 of the periodic table. Chlorine, bromine and iodine are elements in group 7 of the periodic table. Which row identify the least dense of these elements in each group? So the least dense means they should be on the top. So lithium is on the top, or A or B option can be right, and chlorine is also on the top, right? So option A is the correct option here. Question 62. Strontium displaces magnesium from molten magnesium chloride. Bromine displaces iodine from aqueous potassium iodide. Which rule describes the change in reactivity down both in group 2 and group 7 of the periodic table? Remember that group 2 has the same trends like group 1, right? So the reactivity will increase down the group. So in group 2, the reactivity down the group increases, whereas in group 7, the reactivity down the group decreases. So increases, decreases, option C is the right option here. Some properties of element R are shown, okay? In which part of the periodic table is R found? So now let's see one by one where it belongs to. Melting and boiling points. If you see, the melting and boiling points are higher, right? So it can be a matter. Now, reaction with the cold water, it gives off hydrogen gas. So if it gives a hydrogen gas, it means it belongs to group 1 or 2, because with cold water, the transition elements will not react. Okay, so we don't have to look for other options. Option A is the right option here, because group 7 and 8 both don't belong to metallic group, right? So B and C is already, we have to deduce this one. Now we are left with A and D, and transition elements, we have to remove this option because it gives off hydrogen gas when react with cold water. Transition elements mostly don't react with cold water. They are least reactive and also burns to give a white solid, and usually the transition elements give colorful compounds. Remember that. So that's why again option D is rejected. So we are just left with option A. So option A is the right option here. Okay, let's say question 64. Some properties of 4 elements P, Q, R, and S are shown in the table. 2 of these elements are in group 1 of the periodic table and 2 are in the group 7. So which statement is correct? So first of all, we have to find which one of them belongs to group 1 and which one belongs to group 7. Okay, so P reacts vigorously with the water. So it means it's a matter and it belongs to group 1. Q does not react with water. So Q is a group 7 element. R reacts explosively. So this one also belongs to group 1. So P and R are actually in group 1. So if you see here where we can find P and R, they are in group 1. Q and R, of course, Q is not in group 1. So this option is wrong. Q is below S in the group 7. This one we can see that S, okay, dissolve giving a colored solution. So it can dissolve in the water and giving a colored solution. So because we already have identified the 2 that are belongs to group 1. So it means the S can also belong to group 7 because Q and S can be group 7. So now Q and S are in group 7. So that's the right option. R is below S and R is not a non-metal, right? So if even you don't know which one is below, which one is above, you can just look at the group 1 and group 7. So Q and S are showing in the group 7. That's why option C is the right option here, okay? Question 65. Which pairs of the element J, K, L, M, and N react together to form a product with a 1:1? Okay, so if they react with 1:1, it means they should form an ionic compound. And forming an ionic compound means one should belong to group 1 and the other should belong to group 7. So J and N, that can be the right option. So can we find J and N? Yes. The second option can be group 2 and group 7. So the 2:2 ratio cancel each other and they can be combined in 1:1 ratio. So K and M. So this option can be right. So K and M and J and N. So option D is correct. Question 66. 3 properties of element X are listed. It contains atoms with a full outer shell of electrons. That's obvious. It should be a group 8 element. It's a monoatomic. It's unreactive. So, of course, it's group 8. The noble gases. So, option C is right. Question 67. Which statement describes the elements in group 8 of the periodic table? Of course, we are talking about the what noble gases. So, first option, our atoms have full outer shell electrons, right? They are unreactive metals. Wrong. Metals. They are not metals. They are monoatomic gases. Yes, that's right. They are diatomic gases. Of course, if they are monoatomic, they can't be diatomic. So, a 1 and 3 statement is correct. That is option A. Question 68. Which diagram represents the arrangement of outer shell electrons of a noble gas? So it should have 8 electrons in the outermost shell. Okay. None of them have 8 electrons. So we are just left with the helium option because helium belongs to group 1 and it belongs to period 1 of the periodic table and it has only 2 electrons in its first and outermost shell. Okay. It has only one shell and that is also called the first and outermost shell and it has 2 electrons, right? So option A is the right option here. Question 69. The electronic structure of helium, neon, and argon are shown. Which row describe these gases? So reactivity. Of course, they are unreactive. Okay, A option is wrong. Now let's see. They are diatomic? No, they are always monoatomic. So option D is the right option here. Question 70. Which statement about elements in group 8 of the periodic table is correct? They all have a full outer shell of electrons. Yes, that's right. So option A is correct. We don't have to look other options. Let's see question 71. The noble gases are in group 8 of the periodic table. Which statement explain why noble gases are unreactive? So, first of all, they all have 8 electrons in their outer shell. Yes, it seems right. They all have full outer shell. So, that is more better because helium doesn't contain 8 electrons. It has only one shell. And we know that first shell only contains 2 electrons. So, that's why option A we cannot choose. So option B is the more better option. That is, they have full outer shell electrons. So option B is correct. Question 72. Which word describe a noble gas? They are compound, wrong. Okay. They are element, yes, right. Okay. They are colorless, yes, that's right. Okay. They burn in air, no, they does not burn in air because they are unreactive. So option C is the right option here. Okay, let's see next question. Question 73. Which statement describes a gas which is in group 8 of the periodic table? Okay, a colorless gas, okay, right, that helps substance burn, wrong. It cannot burn, right? It's unreactive. A pollutant gas, wrong. A gas that is less dense than the air and makes a pop sound with a lighted split. It's less dense, that can be right, but it cannot make a pop sound. Okay, so that's wrong. A gas that is used in lamps. Yes, that's right, because we have a gas that is a noble gas and that is used in lamps and that is argon. Okay, so option D is right. Helium is a noble gas. Which statement about helium is correct? It has 8 electrons, wrong. It is diatomic gas, wrong. It is reactive, wrong. It is used for filling balloons. Yes, that's right. That is the use of helium. Let's see question 75. Why is helium used to fill balloons? Okay, so it is monoatomic. Yes, we know. But what is the reason behind filling the balloons? Because it is less dense than the air. That's why we use helium. So option D is right. Question 76. Why are weather balloons sometimes filled with helium rather than hydrogen? Because helium is less reactive. Okay, and it is less dense than of course, it's not less dense than the hydrogen, right? Because it has the proton number 2, but it is unreactive. That's why we prefer it, our hydrogen. Okay, question 77. A flammable gas needs to be removed from a tank at an industrial plant. For safety reason, an inert gas is used. So inert gas means it should be a noble gas. So which gas is suitable? Of course, we have only one option, that is from group A, that is argon. So argon is the right option. Question 78. Why is argon used to fill electric lamps? Because it is not reactive. Okay, so option D is right. Question 79. Gas G has 10 electrons. Gas H has 8 more electrons than gas G. Both gases are monoatomic. Which statement about G and H is correct? Okay, both gases are in the same group of the periodic table. Yes, right. Why right? Because if you look at here, the gas G has 10 electrons. It means the first shell has 2 electrons and the second shell has 8 electrons, right? Gas H has 8 more electrons. It means it has 18. So now it has how many electrons in the first shell? First shell has 2, then second has 8, and third also have 8. So if it has 8 electrons in the last shell, so it means it belongs to group A, that is noble gas. So both belongs to the same group in the periodic table. So if they belong to same group, then they cannot belong to same period, right? Because the number of electrons are different. So that's why option B is wrong. A is right, so we can just choose the option A. Question 80. Helium and neon exist as monatomic gases at room temperature and pressure. So let's see first statement. Helium and neon have 8 electrons in their outer shell. That's wrong. Helium has 2 electrons and neon has 8. Okay. So helium and neon are unreactive. That's right. So statement 2 is right. So that's wrong. Again wrong. Statement wrong. Statement 1 is incorrect, but statement 2 is correct. So option D is the right option here. Question 81. 2 statements about noble gases are given. First, noble gases are reactive. Wrong. Noble gases all have full outer shell of electrons. Yes, statement 2 is right. Okay. So both statements option are wrong. Let's see now. This one, statement 1 is correct. Yes, but statement 2 is incorrect. Yeah or no? That's wrong. Statement 1 is incorrect. It's not reactive. So statement 2 is correct, but statement 1 is incorrect. Yes, option D is the correct option here because noble gases have full outer shell electrons and they are unreactive. Okay, so that's why option D is correct. Question 82. 2 statements about argon are given. Argon has a full outer shell of electrons and argon is very reactive and is used in lamps. So now option 2 is wrong. It is used in lamps, but it is unreactive. The first statement is right. Okay, so both, we cannot choose this one. Let's see now. Statement 1 is correct, but statement 2 is incorrect. Yes, that's right. So option C is the right option here. Question 83. The electronic configuration of 4 elements P, Q, R, and S are shown. Okay. Which elements are unreactive monoatomic gases? So for that one, they should have the the shell should be full, right? It has 8 electrons in the outermost shell, S, so it means it is a monoatomic. Where we can find S? So D and B. Now let's see, the B has option P also. Is it right? Yes, that's also right because helium has only 2 electrons and in the first shell, we just need 2 electrons. So it has full outer electron shell. That's why P is also a right option. P and S, that is option B. Option D is correct. Question 84. An inert gas R is used to fill weather balloons. Which description of R are correct? So the number of outer shell electrons in atoms of R. Okay, so the outer electron shell, how you can know that it should be 8 or 2? If you remember that helium is actually used to fill weather balloons. So that's why helium only have 2 electrons in the outermost shell. So option A or B can be right. Now the structure of a gas, it is a single atoms. Okay, so that's why option B is a correct option here. Let's see question 85. A balloon is filled with helium. Helium is a noble gas and makes the balloon rise up in the air. The density of air is 1.23 gram per dm cube. Which gas is helium? So of course the helium density should be lower than the air. So we have to find the value that is lower than the air. So this is A and B. So let's see now reaction with oxygen. It is an inert gas. It's a noble gas, so it don't react with any of the elements. So that's why the option B is the right option. It does not react with oxygen. Question 86. Which row describes an atom of a noble gas? Okay, so the noble gas, the number of protons, let's see if it has 2 number of protons and 0 electron, that's wrong because the proton number should be equal to the electron number. So that's why the option 2 is right. The number of protons are 2. It means they are talking about helium and the number of electrons is also same. So that's why option B is the correct option here. Question 87. The noble gases are in group 8 of the periodic table. Some properties of the first 4 noble gases are shown. Which row identifies the trends in boiling point and density in group 8 of the descendant? So let's see what is happening to the density. If you see the density is increasing down the group, right? So it's increasing, and boiling point, if you see with the negative sign, the greater the value means it is the lower. So actually the boiling point is increasing down the group, right? Increasing and density also increasing. So where we can find the word increasing, that is option B. So option B is the right option here. Question 88. Part of the periodic table is shown. Which element is used to provide an inert atmosphere? Of course, if it provides inert, it should be from group 8, noble gases. So option C is the right option here. Okay, let's see question 89. Part of the periodic table is shown. Which element is a gas that does not form a compound with a potassium? So first of all, we have to find which one of them is a gas. C, of course, is not a gas. It's a metal. So metals are solid. A, D, B, we are left with. So now it does not form a compound with potassium. A and D can react because they belong to group 6 and 7. But B is an inert gas. It will not react with any of the elements. So that's why option B is the right option. Because group 8 element does not react with any of the elements, right? So option B is correct. Question 90. Which diagram show a mixture of noble gases? So mixture means they should be monoatomic. So D and A can be the right options. But they are asking about the mixture, so it means we should have more different type of noble gases in one place. So that's why option A is the correct option here. Question 91. How does the nature of oxide change across period 3 from sodium to chlorine? So the nature of the oxide, if you look in the periodic table in the period 3, it is sodium is a metal. So for it will make the basic oxide. And then if you move across, you can find the aluminium, magnesium. Magnesium also made the basic oxide. Then we have aluminium, it makes amphoteric. And then we have silicon, phosphorus, sulfur, they form acidic oxides, right? So option A is the right option, basic, amphoteric, and then acidic. Question 92. Which set of elements show the change from metallic to non-metallic character across a period of the periodic table? So remember that metals are on the left side. So we have to find the metals. Beryllium, of course, is a metal. Fluorine, non-metal. So that option is wrong. C, oxygen is also wrong. Then sodium, that option is also right. So sodium and beryllium is right. Now we have to see the metallic to non-metallic character across the period. So if you see beryllium, and then we have magnesium. But magnesium belongs to the same group. It does not belong to the same period. But if you see the sodium, silicon, and chlorine, they are in the same period, and that is period 3. So that's why option D is the right option here, because sodium is metallic, silicon is non-metallic, and then we have chlorine that is more non-metallic. So D option is correct. Let's see question 93. Which element is in the same period of the periodic table as silicon? Okay, so if we look at the silicon, the period 3, we have sodium that is in the same period, that is 3. So option C is the right option here. Question 94. Which statement about elements in period 3 of the periodic table is correct? Let's see one by one. Aluminium is a non-metal. Wrong. Aluminium belongs to group 3, so it's a metal. Argon is in group 8 and has 8 electrons in the outer shell. Yes, that's right. But we have to look, is it argon is in the period 3? So if you look at argon, yes, argon is in the period 3. So that's why option B is correct here. Let's see question 95. Which statement about the trend shown by the elements of period 3 in the periodic table is not correct? Okay, let's see one by one. The elements become less metallic across the period. Yes, right. Because on left we have metals. And if we move across the period, we will find more non-metals. So that's why A is right. Okay, the group number increases across the period. Yes, that's also right. Because in the left side, we have group 1, then 2, 3, and so on. C, the number of electron shells increases across the period. That's wrong, because in same period, we have same number of electron shells. That is 3. If it belongs to period 3, they should have 3 electron shells. So that's why option C is incorrect. Let's see question 96. Which statement explain why sulfur S has similar chemical property to selenium? So if you look at the periodic table, both selenium and sulfur belong to the same group. It means have the same number of outer shell electrons. That's why they have the same properties, okay? So they both have the same number of electrons in the outer shell. That is the right option. Non-metal option can also be right. Negative ions can also be a right option. But why they have similar chemical properties? The reason is because they belong to same group. So that's why option A is a right option here. Question 97, going from right to left across the periodic table. So be very careful. They are talking about right to left. It means on the right we have non-metals and on the left we have metals. Okay. So increasing the metallic character. Why this metallic character increases from right to left across a period? So the atoms have more electrons. Wrong. From right to left, the atoms have less electrons. It means they are talking from group A to group 1. If you move across group A to group 1, it means the number of electrons are decreasing in the outer shell. The atoms more readily gain electrons. Wrong. Metallic property is to lose electrons. So the third option is the right option here. That is C. The atoms more readily lose electrons to form positive ions. Question 98. Q and R are the elements in the same period of the periodic table. Q has 7 electrons in its outer shell and R has 2 electrons in its outer shell. Which statement about Q and R is correct? So if it has 7 electrons, it means it belongs to group 7 and it is non-metal. So Q is a metal. That's wrong. Q is a non-metal. Okay. Q and R have different number of electron shells. Wrong. Because they are in the same period. The information is given here. So it means they have same number of electron shells. R is found to the right of Q. So if you look at the Q, Q is a non-metals and non-metals are on the right side, right? So that's why this option is also wrong because R is on the left side. So we are just left with option D. So option D is the correct option. We can just look also that option. The proton number of R is less. Yes, the proton number of R is less than the proton number of Q because it has 2 electrons and they are in the same period. So it means that it has 5 electrons less as compared to that of the Q. So that's why option D is the right option here. Question 99. Element J and K are in the same period in the periodic table. J reacts with acid to produce salts and hydrogen. K reacts with sodium to form an ionic compound. Sodium, of course, is a metal. So it means a non-metal is reacting with the sodium. And J is reacting with acid to produce salt. Okay, so it means J is a metallic oxide, right? Or it's a basic in nature. So which statement about J and K is right? So it means J is actually metal and K is non-metal. An atom of J has more electrons than an atom of K. Is that right? No, because they are in the same period and J is a metal, so it is in the stack, right? It is on the left side, so of course it will have less number of electrons. J and K are both metals. Wrong. J and K are both non-metals. Again wrong. J is to the left of the K. Yes, that's right, because metals are on the left side and non-metals are on the right side. So J is on the left of the K in the periodic table. So option D is the correct option here. Let's see question 100. The electronic structure of element Z is 281. Which statement about Z are correct? It is a metal. Yes, right. Because if you look at the electronic configuration, it has 1 electron in the last shell. So it means it belongs to group 1. It has 2 outer shell electrons. Wrong. It has 3. 1, 2, 3. It is in period 3. Yes, that's right. Because it has 3 electron shells. So it belongs to period 3. So option 1 and 3 are right. That is C. Question 101. Which statement about the trends across period of the periodic table are correct? Okay, aluminium is more metallic than sodium. Wrong. Because sodium belongs to group 2, aluminium belongs to group 3. So aluminium is less metallic. Beryllium is more metallic than carbon. Yes, that's right. Because beryllium belongs to group 2, whereas carbon is in 4. Boron is more metallic than lithium. Again wrong, because lithium is in group 1, whereas boron belongs to group 3. So 1 option is wrong, 3 option is wrong. So we are just left with 2 and 4. So that's why C is the right option here. Question 102. W, X, Y, and Z are elements in the period 3 of the periodic table. The number of outer shell electrons in an atom of each element are shown here. Okay. Which elements are non-metals? So if they have more number of electrons in their outer shell and the number is more than 4, then it means they are non-metals. So Y and Z are the non-metals here. That is C. So option C is correct. Question 103. J and K are two elements from the same period in the periodic table. The table gives some properties of the J and K, okay? Which statement about J and K is correct? If you see the appearance is shiny for J and for K it is dull. It means J is metallic, K is non-metallic, okay? And again, if you see this property, good, not good, right? So it means K is non-metal, J is a metal. So let's see, J forms acidic oxide, wrong. Metal always form basic oxide. J is found to the left of K in the periodic table. Yes, that's right, because J is a metal, so it's found on the left of the K, so option B is correct over here. Question 104. A period of the periodic table is shown here, okay? The letters are not their chemical symbol. Which statement is correct? Okay, let's see one by one. Element R does not conduct electricity, wrong. If it belongs to group 1, it can, because it's a metal. Element R and Y react together to form an ionic compound. R and Y can react, yes, and they can form an ionic compound. That's true. So option B is the right option here. Question 105. The properties of element are listed. Its melting point is 3414. Some of its compounds are catalysts. So which one of them can be catalyst? Of course, transition elements. We don't have to look for other options. Just look for the transition elements. That is option D. So option D is the right option here. Question 106. Which elements have both high melting points and variable oxidation states? Okay, metals have high melting points, and if they have variable, it means they are transition metal. Okay, so option B is the right option here. Okay, let's see question 107. What is a typical property of transition elements? Can act as catalysts? Yes, right. They can act as catalysts. We don't have to look for other options. Of course, they all are wrong, so option A is correct here. Question 108. Which property is shown by transition elements? Low density, of course, wrong. Low melting point, wrong. Variable oxidation state, yes, that's right. Option C is correct over here. Question 109. Element M form both M plus and M2 ions. In which part of the periodic table is M placed? Of course, it's making two different ions. That means it has variable oxidation state, and only transition elements have variable oxidation state. So option D is correct over here. Okay, let's see question 110. Which property is shown by transition metals but not shown by group 1 metals? So good conductor of a good electrical conductivity. Yes, all of them have good conductor activity, good thermal conductivity, loss of electron to form positive ions. Yes, they all are the properties of group 1 metals. But variable oxidation state is the only property of transition metals. So that's why option D is the right option here. Let's see next question. Element X has high density, a high melting point, and high electrical conductivity. It forms many colored compounds. Element X and many of its compounds act as catalysts, which could be the atomic number of X. So for that, we have to look at the periodic table and the atomic number. Okay, so all those which have atomic number more than 20 and that is less than 31, so they can be the one. So that is option B, 26. And which is 26? That is iron. So iron is the right option here. That is option B. Let's see question 112. Which metal form ions with one oxidation state? Okay, so aluminium, chromium, copper, iron. Chromium, copper, iron, they all are transition metals, so they will have variable oxidation state. So we are just left with option A, that is aluminium. Question 113. Which metal has variable oxidation state? So we have to find the one that is a transition metal, and copper is actually a transition metal over here, so option C is the correct option here. Okay, let's see question 114. Which pair of compounds show that transition elements have variable oxidation states? Let's see one by one each option. The first option is Cr2O3. If you look at the oxidation state, the other element's number will be actually the oxidation state of the chromium, right? So if oxygen is 3, it means the chromium has oxidation state of +3. Here, chromium again have +3 oxidation state because Br is 3, right? So it has same oxidation state in both the compounds. Now let's see for this one. Copper sulfate. Sulfate usually have -2 oxidation state, and copper here will have +2, okay? So here, copper of course will have +2 again because Cl is actually 2 here. Now let's see for the option C, Fe2O3. So it means iron has 3 oxidation state here, and here iron has 2 oxidation states. So option C is the correct option here. Okay, let's see question 115. Which pair of compounds show a transition element in 2 different oxidation states? Let's see one by one each option. A, Cr has 3 oxidation state here. Again, Cr has 3 oxidation, so it's same. Copper has here one oxidation state because we have only one oxygen. Here carbonate, you have to remember carbonate is 1, copper is also 1, but remember carbonate usually have oxidation number of -2 and copper is also +2 here. That's why they have cancelled the effect of each other, right? So copper is here +2, here it is -1. Here it is +1 and here it is +2. So that's why two different oxidation state for copper are here. That's why option B is the correct option here. Question 116. Which property of copper explain why it is classified as a transition element? Of course, it has variable oxidation states. That's why. So copper forms copper 2+ and copper plus ions. So that's why it is a transition element. B is the right option here. Question 117. Which statement describe transition elements? They have high density, yes. High melting points, yes. Right. So option A is the right option here. This statement about transition elements and their compounds is correct. All transition elements have an oxidation state of +2, only wrong. They have variable oxidation state. Aqueous solution of the salts of transition elements are generally colored. Yes, transition elements usually give colorful compounds, right? So that's why option B is right. Question 119, which statement describe the properties of transition elements? They form colorful compounds. Yes. They have variable oxidation state. Yes. They have low density. Wrong. They are volatile. Again, wrong. So 1 and 2 is the right option. That is option A. Question 120. Some properties of substance are listed. They conduct electricity. They have low density. Wrong. Okay, so we have to check for transition and metals. Transition metals don't have low density. 1 is right. They have high melting points. 3 is right. They are malleable. Yes, that's also right. So 1, 3, and 4. That is option D. So option D is correct. Question 121. Which statement about transition elements are correct? They have low density. Wrong. They form ions with variable oxidation numbers. Yes, right. They have high melting points. Yes, right. They form only colorless compounds. Not colorless. They form colorful compounds. So 2 and 3 is the right statement. So that is option C. Question 122. Which properties do the elements chromium, iron, and vanadium have in common? So they all are transition metals. So we have to check one by one. They all conduct electricity. They or their compounds can act as catalysts. So both these statements are right. They all form colored compounds. Yes, this statement is also right. So all the 3 options are right. That is option A. Question 123. Manganese oxide is a black solid. The equation for the reaction between manganese oxide and dilute HCl is shown here. Okay. The reaction produces a pink solution. Which properties of transition element does this reaction show? So we have to look for this reaction. It is giving a colorful solution also, right? And before it was a black solid. So now the color changed, the compound is giving different color. So we have to check they form colorful compound. That is right. They can act as a catalyst. There is no catalyst reaction because manganese was before manganese MnO2 and now it is MnCl2, right? The compound has been changed. So that's why it does not act as a catalyst. So wherever we'll find the option 1, that will be wrong. So A and B are wrong now. We are just left with 2 and 3 and 4. They form colored compounds. Yes, right. They have high melting points. Yes, that's also right. They have variable oxidation number. Okay. So that's also right. But which option is this equation showing? The first one, the second one, it is showing they form colorful compounds. Yes, that's right. Now we have to choose between 3 and 4. They have high melting points. Second, they have variable oxidation number. If you look at the oxidation number of Mn here, it is +4, right? Because oxygen is -4 here. We have 2, right? So here we have +4. Now let's see about here, MnCl2. Here the oxidation state is +2 because Cl will be now -2 here. We have 2 chlorine, so -2. So here +2 and here +4. So now we have variable oxidation number in both the compounds. So that's why 2 and 4, that is option D is the correct option. Why not a high melting points? Because they're not talking about here the melting and boiling points. So option D is the correct option here. Question 124. When aqueous iodine is added to a solution of vanadium ions, V2 plus the V2 ions each lose 1 electron. So vanadium ions were before 2 plus, now it lose 1 electron. So what will happen? It will become V2 3. Right? So which property of transition element is shown by this reaction? It means it is changing its oxidation state, right? So and transition elements have variable oxidation states. Transition elements form a stable 1+ ion. That's wrong. It's not forming a 1+ ion because it will form 3+ ion because it is losing 1 more electron. But the option 1 is right because transition elements have variable oxidation states. Okay, so option A is correct. Question 125. Iron reacts with dilute HCl to form iron 2 chloride. Iron reacts with chlorine to form iron 3 chloride. Which property of transition element is shown by this information? What is showing here? The oxidation number. Before it is 2, now here it is 3. So we have to look for the oxidation state. And this option is right, that is C. Transition elements have variable oxidation states. Okay, let's see question 126. Iron 2 ions can be oxidized to iron 3 ions by hydrogen peroxide. Which statement explain why iron is a transition element? Of course, why iron is a transition element? Because it has variable oxidation states. So option B is the right. Cobalt is a transition element. What is a property of cobalt? It can form colorful compounds. Yes, that's right. Transition elements usually form colorful compounds. So option A is correct. Question 128. Which compound is likely to be colored? So we have to find the one which has a transition metal. So which one of them has a transition metal? Of course, manganese is a transition element. So A option is the right option here. Question 129. Some properties of two metals G and H are shown here. Okay. Which row shows about the metals G and H is correct? So metal G, the formula of the chloride is GCl. It means it belongs to group 1, right? React with cold water. So in group 1 of the periodic table, yes, that's right. So A or B option can be right. Now let's see for metal H. High melting points and have more than one oxidation state. It means they are transition metals. So which option is right? That is option B. Question 130. Which element in the table are transition elements? So these are all element E, F, G, and H. Let's see the properties. Form E3 plus ions only. So it means it's not a transition element. Form F plus and F2 ions. Yes, it's a transition metal. G. Form only white salts. Wrong. Transition elements form colorful salts. H. Used in catalytic converter. Yes, that's right, because it has catalytic properties. So F and H are the transition elements. That is option D. Question 131. The table gives some properties of an element. Okay. Which other property does this element have? If you see, the chloride means the salt is colorful, density is very high, electrical conductivity is high, metallic melting point is very high, appearance of the element is gray. So what does it mean? It means it is giving colorful compound itself. It is also colorful. So it is actually a transition element. So now we have to find the property which is missing here. Brittle, of course, it can't be because it is a metal. Form acidic oxide, again wrong because it is a metal. Highly reactive with water, again wrong because they are less reactive than group 1 and transition metals are usually less reactive, right? So A is the only left option, that is act as a catalyst, because transition elements usually act as catalysts. Question 132. Acidified potassium dichromate is used to oxidize ethanol. The ionic equation for the reaction is shown here. Okay, which properties of transition elements are shown by chromium in this reaction? If you look at chromium over here, we have to see that is it acting as a catalyst, yes or no, or is it showing the variable oxidation state. So first of all, if you look over here, before chromium was Cr2O7 and now it has changed to Cr. So it means it is not acting as a catalyst. It does not remain the same, right? So C or D option can be right. Now let's see for the variable oxidation number. Here the oxidation number of the chromium, if you look over here, it is oxygen R7, right? So it means minus 14. But if you look at 2 here, it means the option should be minus 16 now. So Cr2 will be how much? Cr2 will be 8. One Cr will have plus 8 charge, but here it is 3 plus charge, right? So that's why it has a variable oxidation state. That is option C. So option C is the correct option here. Question 133. The formula of two compounds of manganese MnO2 and KMnO4 are shown. In these two compounds, the oxidation state of potassium is +1 and the oxidation state of oxygen is -2. What are the oxidation state of manganese in each of these compounds? If you see over here, O2 is -2 here, right? So, but we have 2 oxygen here, so it is -4 here. So manganese should be +4 to make it neutral, right? To make the compound neutral, the negative and positive charges should be equal. So if it is -4, manganese should be +4. So MnO2, we have +4, both are right, C and D. Let's see for KMnO4 here, O is -8, right? Manganese should be how much? Potassium is if +1, then manganese should be +7 to stabilize this compound, right? +8 and -8. So if K is +1, the total we are left with +7. So that's why option D is the right option here. Question 134. Which row shows the catalytic activity of transition elements and their compounds? Okay, catalytic activity, very good. And catalytic activity of their compound is also very good. So option A is the right option here. Which row describe the properties of transition elements? Form colorless compounds, wrong. High density, yes. These options are right. Act as a catalyst, yes. So option C is the correct option here. Question 136. Which row shows the properties of a transition element? Catalyst, yes. Color of oxide, red, green, yes, it should be colorful. Electrical conductivity should be good. So that's why we are just left with option A. Question 137. Some information about 4 elements P, Q, R, and S is shown here. Okay. Which elements are transition elements? So first of all of them are colorful, right? Except this one. So Q is, now we have to reject this option. We are just left with P, R, and S. Okay. So where we can find Q, that can be rejected. So option C, we don't have to choose. Now we are just left with A, B, and D. Now let's see about the density. So the density should be very high. It can be 7 or it can be 6, right? That is more higher as compared to these two. So it means P and R. And if you see the melting points, it's also very high. So P and R are actually the transition elements. P and R, can we find here? Yes, option A is the correct option here. Question 138. Which row describe the properties of a transition element? Melting points, yes, very high. Density are higher. So that's why option B is right. Okay, form colorful compound, yes. Question 139. Which row describe the properties of typical transition element? Melting point, high, yes. Density, high. Use as catalyst, yes. So option A is correct. Question 140. Which row describe the properties of a typical transition element? Again, melting point, high. Form colorful compounds, yes. Okay, high, yes. So we are just left with option B. Catalyst, of course, yes. So option B is correct. Question 141. Osmium is a transition element. Which row gives the expected properties of osmium? Okay, so transition elements, melting point high, yes. Density high. Compounds, yes. Colored. So option A is the correct option here. Question 142. Which row describes the properties of transition element? Form colorful compounds, high density, high melting points. Yes, so A, B, C are the right option here. Now let's see for property 2. High density, yes. High melting points, color compounds. Yes, again, these 3 are right. Now let's see for property 3, variable oxidation state. Yes, here they are talking about one oxidation state. So these 2 are not right. We are just left with option A. So option A is correct. Question 143. Which of the following could be a transition element? So melting point should be high. So it means C or D can be the transition element. Density should be more high. So 4.5 can be the right option. So this is C. Gray. And electrical conductor, yes. So that's why option C is the correct option. Let's see question 144. Which row describe a typical transition element? Density, very high. Oh, and this is D. So let's look at the other options. Are they right or not? Color oxides, yes, red. Boiling points, very high. Melting points, very high. So that's why option D is the right option here. Question 145. The properties of elements titanium can be predicted from its position in the periodic table. Which row identifies the properties of titanium? So if you look at the periodic table, titanium is in the middle of the periodic table. It means it's a transition element. So it can be used as a catalyst, yes, right. Conduct electricity when solid, yes, right. Low density, that's wrong. So that's why option B is the right option here. Question 146. The table gives information about 4 elements P, Q, R, and S. Which elements could be transition elements? So now let's see the melting points. The melting point should be very high. So R and S, they have high melting points. Now let's see for electrical conductivity. It should be good. So S, we are just left with S, right? So where we can find the S? Yes, this is the right option. Density very high and colorful compound, that's right. This is rejected already. Why these 2 are rejected? Because the density is very low here. But here the melting point is very low. So Q is also rejected. So we are just left with option D. Question 147. Which row shows the properties of transition element? Melting point, higher, yes. Electrical conductivity, yes, it should also be higher. Okay, so we are just left with A and C option. Now let's see for the color of chloride. It should be colorful. So C option is the right option here. Question 148. Part of the periodic table is shown. Which element has high density, high melting point, and form a brown oxide? So colorful oxide, high melting, and high density, it should be the transition metal. And that is option B. So these are all questions related to chapter 13 from 2016 to 2024. I will see you in the next video. Up till then, bye-bye.